Hi, friends. This episode of Big Blue Banter is brought to you by Prize Picks. Head on over to Prize Picks and use promo code BANTER, and they'll match up to $100 on a new deposit. Thank you and enjoy.
Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter, New York Giants football podcast. I'm Dan Schneier, joined as always by my co-host Nick Filato. Some are referring to him as the caveman these days with that beard. I think part of why he's been able to pull this off is because his lovely girlfriend is she works and she's a pilot. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that on air, but I don't think it's that.
It's fine. Yeah.
Nick. But and she's not living with him right now. Like, she's doing her work in another area of the country or another area of the world. So I think he can pull it off because of that. I feel like if Diana was around, dude, she would probably be like, this needs to get
Every time I see her, she's like, what are you doing with your life right now? Every time I FaceTime her, I hear about it all the time. I see it in the comments. It's not lost on me, okay? But she is away. I have this opportunity to grow my beard out. She is not a big fan of the beard. And you know what? I'll toot my own horn a little bit here, Dan. I got a pretty damn good beard.
It's good.
There is no room. Like Shane Bowen and I, we can hang out.
Right. You don't have I'm trying to grow it in and I have issues with growing it in. Like, it's not going as great as I want it to. And that's just life. But you get it's all connected here. Like, you got nothing missing. So yeah, let it rip. She's not home anyway. So, you maybe can come up with a filter for when you FaceTime her where it looks like you trimmed it down. And it's not actually the real situation. But I'm here with my bearded co-host, Nick Filato. And today we're going to talk about part 3 of our series of biggest offseason questions the Giants are going to answer. And this one's a big one, I think, moving forward. And it's how to address the run game. We're going to talk all run game. It's not just how to address the running back position, because that's where the crossroads is at. It's the whole run game. Because Nick and I are big believers in a run game starts basically with the blocking and the offensive line. Yes, you can have these superstar running backs that can help you, but do you really want to focus a running game around them? The Giants are going to have that opportunity now to rewrite and retool how they want to move forward at the running back position and with the run game. So we'll talk about that. But first, we want to talk about some news too. We'll use these shows to dive into some news. Those of you who joined us live last night, thank you. Or not last night, whenever you might be hearing this a few days after, but on Monday night, thank you. We broke down the hiring of Shane Bowen as the Giants' new defensive coordinator. So you can check that out on our page. It was a live video, but you can still find that video now. And it's on all of our podcast feeds as well. So thank you for joining us. And if you asked some questions and joined in on the conversation during that live show, thank you as well for that and all the support. But there is some news that's happened since then. So Nick, why don't you introduce that and give your initial thoughts there?
Yeah, the Giants hired a tight end coach because Andy Bischoff went to go coach tight ends under Jim Harbaugh with the Los Angeles Chargers. And the Giants brought in another former Houston Texans tight end coach, Tim Kelly, who most recently was the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. Looks like we're bringing the New York Titans back, Dan. The New York Titans, we're going to bring them back. Yeah, so the offensive coordinator for the Titans in 2023, he was the passing game coordinator for the Titans in 2022. And then before that, in 2021, he was the offensive coordinator for the Texans and was with the Texans dating back to 2014, where he held a variety of different roles. I'm not going to sit here and act like I know too much about Tim Kelly and dive into the positional coach from a team that I don't cover. There's really no way for me to really ascertain how his impact was other than looking at the stats of players like Chig Okonkwo and young tight ends and players from that position group, which also leaves out the context that the Titans offense sucked this year, which you can maybe attribute that to Tim Kelly because he was the offensive coordinator, or you can attribute that to them having a rookie quarterback in Will Levis, Malik Willis, who didn't develop really at all. Seemingly, it doesn't really seem like, and then a old ass Ryan Tannehill behind a pretty poor offensive line. Yeah, a really poor offensive line where their identity was to run the football with Derrick Henry, which I'm sure is heavily influenced by the personnel and also by Mike Vrabel. That was their entire identity as a football team, was built around Derrick Henry. So how much of that is due to Tim Kelly? That kind of predates Tim Kelly. But I'll say this, Chig Okonkwo, athletic tight end. I don't know if he was used to his maximum ability, but he showed signs in the last couple seasons when Tim Kelly was there as an offensive coach. We have a young tight end on this roster that I feel like Andy Bischoff must have done something well with. Must have done something well with this guy, right? And Daniel Bellinger. So maybe we could see some sort of spark that Tim Kelly can ignite with Bellinger and with all the other tight ends, because I'm hoping we add another tight end opposite of just Daniel Bellinger and Darren Waller, because this team needs a third tight end. That was a huge mistake, in our opinion, last year. So they hired Tim Kelly. We'll have to wait and see. Hopefully the B asks him some good questions and we can really learn what this guy's all about.
Yeah, my initial reactions are similar to yours. I think about, one, will this mean for us that the Giants are finally going to invest in more tight ends and more of these two-way tight ends? The Giants have one two-way tight end on the roster in my mind, in Daniel Bellinger, and that means you have the ability to block effectively. And I'm not saying Darren Wall. Darren Wall actually surprised me a little bit as a blocker.
He's
He
not
wasn't
bad.
bad. He's not like Evan Ingram level, but at the level that Daniel Bellinger brings as a blocker, I think the Giants need another player like that who can also catch the football and run routes. And by the way, has been completely, in my mind, underutilized and underdeveloped so far with Daniel Bellinger. At no fault, in my mind, at least, to Daniel Bellinger, because if you watch the tape, he's open on a lot of these routes and the ball's just not coming his way. I don't know who to blame for that. Everybody has their own opinions and when that happens. But it's not his fault. I can't put it on the actual receiver running the routes. And when the ball comes his way, he catches the football. He very rarely drops a football. That catch percentage was amazing as a rookie, and it goes back to last year as well. Obviously, there was some nitpicking that people had. Did he reach for a first down here? Did he do the best he could do there? It's like, whatever. Like, you have a couple opportunities a game to do those things if you're in last year's offense. And we hope that evolves. But like, to me, he's the best example, Nick, of, and we had this with Dalvin Tomlinson as well in the past and other players, like the total best example to me, Daniel Bellinger, of, are you watching the tape or are you going by the box score and maybe what you see on broadcast? Because the people who are like tasked with watching the tape every week, like me and you, or that's part of what we do, we see a totally different picture and outlook for this player on the Giants roster than a lot of other people think. And I know that because when I talked about the possibility of losing Brandon Brown this offseason, a lot of people were like, what has he ever done? And you're really going to give him credit for Daniel Bellinger? I'm like, if you watch the tape, you can kind of see that this is like very good value to get in round 4 of a draft, like a two-way player like that who makes that kind of impact. And I want the Giants to get another player like Bellinger, maybe from this draft or even from free agency, Nick, because I would like to have, you bring in Tim Kelly, a guy who's worked with, he's called plays, he's used tight ends in his offense, and he's obviously coached the tight end position before. Like, these are the types of things I want to get more tight ends more involved in the Giants offense to give the Giants more of a two-way threat as an offense. Sorry, look like you're going to say something, so jump in.
Yeah, just on the Brandon Brown point, it's not even just how I believe he hit on Daniel Bellinger. I also appreciate the investment strategy of going after a tight end who has athletic upside through testing that we didn't necessarily see manifest itself through the receiving portion of his collegiate portfolio,
Right.
because San Diego State didn't throw the football all that much to him. But when they did, you saw success, but his stats didn't jump out to you. And they invested an early day 3 pick in on Daniel Bellinger, and I think it's been a win. And I think Daniel Bellinger was such an important part of a really bad offense last year, which wasn't his fault at all. It was more of the lack of investment into that position group. So I'm hoping Joe Shane gives Tim Kelly a competent, and this isn't a slight on Lawrence Cager. Lawrence Cager is a former wide receiver. You had 2 former wide receivers in college as your 2 tight ends. If Daniel Bellinger got hurt, what were you going to do in 6-man? It was such an oversight by the front office, and then it fell on the coaching staff and the tight end position specifically. In no world, Dan, should an injury to your second tight end cripple your game plan. And that's what happened against the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, when they lost Bellinger, yep.
Everyone's like, I was like it too. I was like, where is Darren Waller? It's like Darren Waller has to block so much because the offensive line also sucks. So everything works together here, man. And I'm just hoping that they give Kelly a third tight end who can actually at least not be paper mache out there as a blocker.
I think they will. I think he's going to bring over ideas that like we can use in the run game if we have another tight end like a Daniel Bellinger and we can add one to the roster. So that excites me. I think, you brought up the Chig Okonkwo point. Chig coming out of Maryland, he was a very raw prospect.
Very.
Like, way raw. Like, we talk about Daniel Bellinger having untapped potential based on his athletic testing and the movement skills we saw on film at San Diego State. I even think you see it on film with the Giants. Like, you talk about some of the when he worked a little bit with DeVito over the middle of the field this year, and DeVito hit him on a couple of those hole shots. It was like, okay, he's working into space really well, and he's understanding the spatial awareness of where to sit here to make this play. And that takes athleticism. That takes, obviously, some high football IQ as well. But it's like when you talk about those players like a Chig type who's super underdeveloped and needs to develop, even to get to the point where he's gotten him to in his career, I think Tim Kelly and Chig Okonkwo shows a sign of improvement and shows a sign of development on the side of the player and on the side of the coach as well. So I'm excited to see how he can develop Daniel Bellinger. I think there's an opportunity for that. And then obviously we hope he brings in another player. I personally would prefer it via the draft in a similar range to where they got Bellinger. But if it's via free agency, I'm okay with that too. I just think what you said is the most important point. They can't do what they did last year, where it's like Bellinger plus 2 former receivers as your tight end group. That just is not, it's not a winning formula for any football team. And I know it dates back because like if you look at what Brian Dable did in Buffalo, Nick, it really wasn't a lot of usage of tight ends. He used a lot, like at times he was one of the guys using the 4 receiver stuff and not really. And I remember there were times where Dawson Knox was playing like 20% of the snaps in a game and really low numbers for tight end use. So it just might not be a huge part of what his system is. But with where the Giants are at right now, if Daniel Jones is QB1, they need a heavy personnel type of offense, I think, for the most part. This is not the type of guy who's catching the ball at a gun and going through full field reads and like progressing through all his and utilizing everything that's out there on the field. It's the type of guy that you can use to set up a run game and then use play action, big drops, and then Jones can kind of hit those defined reads off of the play action. I think he's okay at that type of stuff, and I think he's better, bootleg, throw out to quick to the tight end, whatever it may be on, a block and release. It's just like I don't really see him as the type of quarterback that Dable had in Buffalo to operate that kind of offense. So adding a tight end would help Jones as well, and then overall would help the offense.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And there are some solid tight ends in this class who can block and can also run and can catch. The one I was watching, the Theo Johnson kid from Penn State, they ran so many damn screens to him, and it actually reminded me of what Tim Kelly what Tim Kelly, because he was the offensive coordinator, did with Chig this past year. A lot of tight end screens to try to spring his athletic.
I mean, we didn't do enough of, by the way, with Bellinger or Waller.
No, not at all. We didn't. I mean, offensively, the Giants didn't really do enough of a lot of things. They did a lot of sucking. That's what they did.
Yeah. They did. All right, let's transition the conversation now, and let's talk about what we're here today, which is the next part of our offseason series, and it's where do the Giants go at running back, and where do they go with their run game? So I want to we're gonna talk about free agent running backs, including Saquon Barkley. We're going to talk about the franchise tag. Will they use it? Will they not? We're going to talk about this draft class, by the way, because for my money, Nick, and it's early, but I'm just looking at this on paper. And we've done this now a few years very seriously. And I've done it maybe a year or two before that in some serious compassion. This to me will probably go down as by far and away the least impressive, least interesting, and least intriguing running back class I've ever studied. I very rarely go through a class like this. Like, for example, not a single running back is in Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 overall. And you made a good point off pod, Nick, where it's like there are a lot of good prospects in this class can push him down, but like he's not the type that just doesn't rank a running back high because of positional value. Like he had Josh Jacobs as like his 14th best prospect in that draft class. Like he will rank a running back high if he believes a running back is worth the top 50, one of the 50 best players on the board. And he doesn't have a single guy there. And I'm looking through this class, dude. I see somebody like Blake Corum in the top 5. Corum is a great college football player. He also was like close to dead last among all these draft eligible guys in forced missed tackle rate, yards after contact, all the things that usually translate to the NFL level. Like if he's one of your 5 best players in your class at running back, I have no confidence in that position group whatsoever. I'm sure we'll find gems, Nick. I find gems every year at running back. It's why I love the position. There are some interesting players in this class, but like I look up and down this list, and on paper, I am not very impressed with this running back class in general. So we're going to talk about that because that's a big factor in where the Giants go with Barkley and with the running back position as well. But first, before we do that, I want to talk to you. Yeah, go ahead. You had something.
No, I was just going to mention the Giants do have a young running back on their roster, and we're going to talk about him a lot, which could set up another strategy of adding a veteran and then just going with an RBBC.
True. Which, by the way, sorry, you've just programmed my brain to never mind. Don't worry about that.
I really hope you're not thinking of what I think you're thinking.
You did that. You made me like this, dude. You made me like this. I was never thinking, and there's jokes that you always throw in made me like this, but we'll let this one pass. But as far as the running game goes, in general, I want to talk a little philosophical and overview and 30,000-foot view stuff before we get into specifics. And that would mean, where are we at with our belief of what you should do as an NFL franchise when it comes to your running game? Because we're at a crossroads here with Barkley, obviously with his contract up, and all the reports suggesting, we'll talk more about this on the pod on this show, but suggesting they might just not even tag him and let him hit the open market. But we're at a crossroads and we can really retool this. But there's this big divide, I feel like, among fans and NFL and to lesser extent analysts, but fans about like how you build out your run game. Like, and how much of an impact is it? The actual blocking and the scheme and the combination of the blocking and the scheme, and how much of it is the individual player? Because we'll look at a lot of these teams, man. The Chiefs are a great example, right? Like, when did they get Isaiah Pacheco? And he's a good talent, but they got him in the 6th round, Isaiah Pacheco. I think he was either a 6th or 7th round draft pick for the Chiefs. And it's not the first example of a team, either having one guy that's led a lot by scheme or the blocking, or two or three guys, like you said in our BBC, where it's led a lot by just, sorry, you smiled and then you got me again. It's led a lot by, the blocking and the scheme. Like before, the 49ers have been taken to another level with McCaffrey. There's no doubt about that. McCaffrey's also the best route running back I've ever seen, and probably in the history of the game, in my opinion, will go down. As Marshall Faulk, we'll give him credit too, but I think it'll be McCaffrey when it's all said and done. But before McCaffrey got there, Nick, it's not like they weren't generating yards based on the scheme. Mostert was doing it. They had Mitchell. They had plenty of guys before him. And then we look at Miami, and Mostert's doing it based on scheme. And Devin Singletary starts to come out, break out with that same scheme this year, late in the year with Houston. And these aren't star players, Mostert, Mitchell, Singletary, right? These are late round draft picks that you can get in every class that, are productive in a lot of ways because, in my mind at least, the running game, you want to build it out through the O-line and through the scheme. That's how you get a running game. You don't build it out by focusing it on one player who can easily get injured and is going to have tread on his tire. You're going to wear him down. None of it makes sense to me going in that route. So, you know where I'm at with this, Nick, but I want to get your thoughts on the run game before we get into this.
I think you need to use a Dan Schneider phrase, take a step back, we all do, and look at everything from a 30,000 foot view standpoint. The rushing game, there's a lot of components that go into the rushing apparatus. Yes, you want a strong offensive line. You want a good system. But you also need an offense because you listed the Chiefs. You listed the 49ers. You listed the Texans, who had a really good quarterback. You listed Miami, really good system. You need a system that is competent. And one of the best ways to have a system based on competency is to have a quarterback in place that can dictate to the defense. And the Giants don't necessarily have that right now. So I think that would be the primary way to help spark a rushing attack, is to really figure out the quarterback position, to strike fear into the defense so it can alleviate pressure on your running game and take a burden off of your rushing game. And then you can throw to open up the run, which we've seen, right?
Right.
And we see a lot of teams do this. That's one of the reasons why the Chiefs can add an Isaiah Pacheco, who's a good running back. No one's taking anything away from him. He fell into a team with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. It's a great situation to find yourself in. So I think that's what we really need to be striving for. But to bring it down a little bit, yes, building through the trenches with a strong offensive line, I think is the primary asset. If we're not talking about the quarterback, we're just talking specifically about the running game. We're being very narrow-minded on this. Yes, getting that offensive line figured out, and not just from a talent standpoint, that's really important. You need the right players in there, your best five, but from cohesiveness standpoint, you need these players to be playing on the same page.
Yes.
We appreciated and gave Bobby Johnson even some credit in 2022 for his ability to come up with different blocking styles and incorporate Daniel Bellinger as a fullback and an H-back in a bunch of different creative ways, not just counter, but the traps. And it helps spring some big plays down the stretch of that 2022 season against the Colts. I appreciated that about him, but it still never seemed like under Bobby Johnson, not just the development, which was his biggest indictment as an offensive line coach, didn't seem like they ever really played as a full unit, despite those small adjustments that did help the Giants down the stretch. So what I want from Carmen Brasillo, the current offensive line coach, is just to get the best five out there to play like a damn unit, man. That's going to come from coaching. It's going to come from bringing in the right players as well. But it does start from that standpoint on the offensive line. But I still think there's going to be issues with this rushing attack if the Giants don't threaten defenses with explosive plays, which is going to come from the quarterback position.
You're 100% right about that. I mean, look at the rest of the NFL is a great example of that. The teams that have been able to generate run games due to their pass game, and there's also other factors in it. Like if you have a true alpha X, like the Giants had at times with Odell Beckham Jr., things will look better in your run game because the defense has to allocate more resources to stopping that alpha X. And if you're allocating more resources stopping that player, you're allocating less to stopping the run game in general. But I do think your point about utilizing the tight ends, Daniel Bellinger, and we are hoping they add someone in the run game, is also a super big factor in this. There's so many different factors that are at play in my mind that are unrelated to the running back. And the running back is huge a part of this too. Like he's going to make, especially if you got like a home run type hitting running back, like a Devin Achan or something, that's totally different. Or like Barkley was in 2018 when he had 9 runs of 40 plus yards. He hasn't had more than 1 or 2 in the last few seasons. But when he had those 9, that was different. And yes, part of that was also because Odell Beckham Jr. was on that offense and he was taking away attention. And the same thing goes for Miami. Part of why Achane is able to get those explosive opportunities is because the defense is allocating all their resources to coverage against Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle and that passing game. But that's a big part of it. And it's a good point that you made. But none of while all those are good points, none of them point back to a singular one guy at the running back position that can really transform a running game. And I'm struggling to see that. You could talk about Derrick Henry as the guy who's done it in the past if you want an outlier example. And I can maybe give you that, but I can also point to those teams that had a really good marriage of the run game to the pass game under Arthur Smith, which is the point I want to get to next, by the way. So I want to make sure I circle back to that. But had a really good marriage of the run game and the pass game under Arthur Smith in Tennessee, had Ryan Tannehill playing his best football, and most importantly, had the offensive line operating at a very high level. It wasn't just you threw Derrick Henry in the mix and you said, we have no O-line, we have no marriage of the run game to the passing game, we have no A.J. Brown out there like they had, and everything's fine, and it's just all Henry. That never works out. It doesn't work out that way in my mind, at least not in the modern day NFL, and I don't even think it worked back in the time. I think O-line was still a huge part of it, and blocking was still a huge part of it. But it gets me to my next point about run game and passing game, Nick, because this is something I always look to like try to evolve my thinking and get out of my takes that I feel like are bad if they are bad. And one of my old takes that I felt like, what if an NFL offense just said F it and threw the ball to open up the run the entire game and really just threw the ball for the most part? And I thought about that recently and thinking about teams that have really worked and had like, springing their offenses. The Texans are a great example under Bobby Slowick. And the Rams are another great example, the 2023 version of the Rams under Sean McVay. And I really do believe they kind of retooled their offense under him. And I'm now convinced that's not, that's never possible. That idea I had at one point, like, what if an NFL team that I don't think it's possible. I think the best coordinators and the best offenses are the ones who marry their run game to their pass game, the ones who give you the same look, and it can be a run play or a pass play. And you can't have that offense unless you have a run game. You cannot abandon the run completely and then be able to do that, because then no one buys when you're running the football and more importantly, you're just not attempting to run. So you're not showing the same look. And that is the key to me to great offensive scheming, great offensive system, and great offensive play calling. You're able to marry your run game to your passing game. So to me, I'm more focused on that than I'm focused on having a singular running back who's explosive and he's creating all these forced missed tackles and doing all these things that are flashy and they look good on the highlight tape. But like, I need to make sure my running game is functional and I'm able to use my running game to set up play action shots in the passing game or to set up different looks in the passing game. So that's where my focus is of the Giants moving forward, like getting the run game to that point. And they did it, by the way, a lot of the time in 2022 was part of why they were able to. Now they still weren't able to generate that much in the passing game off of that, but they're able to generate good looks that at times weren't attempted by the quarterback, or at times the offensive line broke down and they didn't have time to attempt it by the quarterback, but they were able to generate some good looks off marrying plays in their running game, pass game. So that's where my focus is at, as like a core to regenerating a run game.
What's going on, Big Blue Banter listeners? I'm excited for the football season for several reasons. And one of those reasons is Prize Picks, which is North America's largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform. And it's so simple to use. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including professionals, sharks, and people who are going to exploit you, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you just watch the winnings roll in. It's very simple to play and gives you a little extra skin. I've set my picks in less than 60 seconds. There are so many stats to choose from, and the withdrawals of funds are easy and quick. Dan and I will be adding a segment to our show before every game where we pick our favorite stats, more or less, yards or touchdowns, what have you, and we'll be discussing why from a scheme, matchup, and game theory perspective. I love their promotions and how easy their interface is to operate at Prize Picks. I may select more on tackles for a loss from Bobby Okereke or Kayvon Thibodeau next game. They also do other sports as well. It's a really cool experience. Please join Dan and I in the fun of Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/banter and use code BANTER for a first deposit match up to $100. You will not regret it. Oh, my friends, you know what time it is. You're hungry, you're starving, and you desperately need pizza. You should get the best pizza on the market. And that is, of course, Little Caesars. Make Little Caesars the official pizza sponsor of the NFL part of your game day. Order online during the Pizza pregame all day on NFL game days and even on Pro Bowl Sunday. And get ready for some football fun and cheesy, delicious pizza. Choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza or pick the toppings you crave. Either way, you win. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the game. And what Dan means by marrying the run and the pass game is from the pre-snap phase, you can't tell as a defense if it's going to be run or pass because it looks the same. You're using the same type of motions, the same type of shifts, the same type of movements. And then at the snap as well, going into the play action phase of it, it just looks like it's going to be a run. The blockers are selling
Yes.
like it is a run. They're not tipping their hands. And that's going to give the linebackers and the safeties their run keys to where they're going to react like it is a run. And that gives Darius Slayton or Wan'Dale Robinson an extra step if it is a pass. And that is something that the Rams and the Texans did such a good. The Rams this season.
The Rams especially, man.
Yes. The Rams especially did that. And you're right, man. That's exactly what that starts with who, though, on this team. It's going to start with Brian Daboll.
Yes.
It's going to start with the head coach who has
it's going to start with Brasillo. It's going to me, it goes through Daboll, it goes through Brasillo. And then maybe you can start talking to me about a running back. But like you bring up the Rams and they're such a good example. How much of that is I mean, I don't know how much of that really is Kyren Williams. I think he's a good processing back. I do think he's underrated in that sense, but he isn't the guy who jumped out of the gym at the combine or who is even in the NFL level on tape. He's not the most explosive back. He doesn't force that many missed tackles and he doesn't create that much yards after contact. He really doesn't. He was what, a 6th round pick by the Rams. They didn't have to use any draft capital to get him. I think he was a late pick. He might have been a 4th or 5th, but either way, he was day 3, 4th round pick, a day 3 pick with not the greatest athletic measurables. And none of it matters because McVay has done such a good job of scheming the run game up, and their offensive line coach did a really good job of getting those linemen on the same page, working together, blocking in unison and playing on time within their run game and within their run scheme. Those are still 1 and 2 for me. The scheming by the coach and the blocking, that's 1 and 2. And that's why you see it with a guy like Kyren Williams who has a breakout season like this one.
So I think Kyren Williams is underrated. I think everything that you said isn't wrong. Yeah. Well, he's very good at processing, but it's the contact balance and his ability to run through arm tackles too. Like his yards after contact was in the high 3s.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said yards after contact. I was just thinking the forced missed tackles and the breakaway speed. The yards after contact is good. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the point that you're driving home, and I think you're onto something, is you can find these guys in the draft.
Oh, yeah.
You don't need to spend a 1st round pick on them. You don't need to give a contract of $15 million to a running back if they're not Christian McCaffrey. And I also think a lot of this is based on where your team is. True. So you need to take a long look in the mirror. And this really goes for the New York Giants and say, if we give a running back $15 million a year right now, what is that going to do in terms of us winning football games right now? And aging
and long-term.
And long-term. Right now, the Giants do not have the infrastructure in place that the 49ers or that the Dolphins or teams like that who made investments in the running back position. Dolphins through the draft with HN when they already had Raheem Mostert, the 49ers when they traded for Christian McCaffrey. Giants are nowhere near that type of football team at this moment. And I think that's really something that we'll probably be exploring throughout the rest of this podcast.
Yeah, you're damn right about that, Nick. And something we'll be discussing throughout the pod. I wanted to get your general overview first. And now I want to talk about the current roster and how it shapes up with the Giants run game. So as the Giants enter this offseason, Nick, they have 2 running backs, their top 2 running backs, scheduled to hit free agency. That's Saquon Barkley and Matt Breida. We'll talk about both of them. They have 2 running backs still on the roster, and Gary Brightwell, who had a bit of an injured 2023 season, but has flashed at times, especially in 2022, and Eric Gray, who we discussed a little bit in the past. The Giants obviously liked him. They felt like they got really good value when he fell to the 5th round, and they just drafted him last year. Now let's talk about the guys that could be leaving first, and then we'll talk about the guys who are already definitely going to be on the roster. And we shouldn't say definitely, but likely to be with those 2 second backs. Saquon Barkley, the first one. As more information seems to come out, Nick, and we don't know if this is true information, but as more information seems to come out, it seems likelier the Giants are not going to franchise tag him again. And they're just going to let him hit the open market, come back to them and be like, this is the deal I got. Do you want to beat this deal or do you want to give me a similar deal? And let's go from there. And I'll say a couple things on that. One, maybe this is merit driven and that's fine, but this is a business, man. Like I'm the Giants, I'm tagging this guy. I'm just franchise tagging him and I'm going to try to tag and trade him at that point. I don't really see the value of just letting him hit the open market except to be nice to the guy who's gave you a lot of good years. And that's fine. I understand that, but it's like, it still is a business. And I'll tell you what, Nick, if he does hit the open market, I don't think he's coming back because I do really honestly believe that as a head coach, Jim Harbaugh, this is like the perfect back for him. And he's not a dude who believes he's a dude who really wants to marry his run game to his pass game and really wants to believe in the run game and getting that set first. And that's fine because it worked for him at Michigan and it's worked for him in the NFL with the 49ers as well. It can still work at the NFL level. And I don't really see and envision Austin Eckler as a Jim Harbaugh type back. Do you? I don't personally see that. And so if it's and he's a free agent as well, by the way, Austin Eckler. So they have that going on. So if the Chargers come to Barkley with a big offer, I don't know too many other teams that are going to give him a big offer, but all it takes is one. And if one team comes to him and it's the Chargers with a big offer, I don't see how the Giants, because I think the Giants are playing the hand a certain way by not tagging him. They're saying essentially, you test it out, see what your value is on the open market, right? And may not be what you think it is. Then you come back to us and you understand why we were negotiating the way we were the entire time. But that may not be the case if Harbaugh comes in with a big deal.
Yeah, a lot of it's going to be contingent on Harbaugh. I think that's the name that's been floated around Twitter, and it does make sense. But again, Saquon Barkley, look, I've vacillated back and forth between should the Giants add him, and then I ultimately kind of took a step back and was like, where are the Giants right now?
Mm-hmm.
Where are they? They're not in a position to where they're going to be compete. If we're going to be realistic, they have a contract on the books right now that I think they probably regret in Daniel Jones. And you look at the 2024 season, and Mara will never admit this. It's never going to be something that they said, nor should they. Again, you got to sell tickets.
Mm-hmm.
You got to entice your fan base. But the Giants need to just rip this Band-Aid off. And they need a clean start.
Yep.
And I don't know if Brian Dable's going to survive that. And that's something that Joe Shane and ownership and all, they can discuss that. But right now,
Shane will survive it, I think.
I think Shane will survive it. I do. But also, what if Kayvon flops next year and Evan Neal sucks?
And Evan Neal sucks. Then it's
and the Giants get a top 1 or 2 pick and there are quarterbacks. And it's do we trust Shane to bring we're not certain. Crazier things have happened. I look at the Saquon Barkley situation, and I think what you said is 100% accurate. You go, we're not going to franchise you, which is about a little bit north of 12 million this year rather than a little bit north of 10, which it was last year. Go test the market. We're willing to bring you back at our price. But if somebody wants you at a better price, you're free to go. And that might be the way they handle it.
Yeah, it might be. And then from my perspective, Nick, and I'll get yours in a second, I don't even know if I'm at that point anymore with it. There was a point in the season where I was willing to entertain it, Nick. There's also a point in the season where I'm like, damn it, I wish they had just re-signed him last year to a multi-year deal and tech because they could have tagged for Daniel Jones, and I'd so much rather be out of it. If you could give me opportunity right now to either not have the Daniel Jones contract, but you're stuck with Saquon Barkley making a big money all the way into his 28, 29 with injuries and whatever, I'm still taking that. I'm still taking that in a heartbeat over what they have at Daniel Jones because that was still only going to be 15, 16 million against cap. Giants are stuck with 47 million against the cap for Jones this season, and I don't even know what he gives you at that price. I don't know what he gives you more than Tyrod Taylor at all. I personally didn't see much. I thought he was worse personally on tape, and I know he had a bit worse situation, and it's fair. But if anything, it's the same that they're giving you at a $30 million difference.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
But that's spilled milk. At this point, I'm looking at it differently, and it's Saquon Barkley. I don't really see the point of re-signing him at this point, really at all. If I'm going to be honest, because
there is a point. There's definitely a point, but
to improve your roster for 2024. Yeah.
No, not necessarily. It's locker room stuff too.
Yeah,
I think that's important, man. I do.
It is.
I think if they let Saquon go and then the offense sucks even worse next year, I think it could just fracture and you're going to have to get rid of Dable. And I'm not saying this as a reason to keep Saquon Barkley. I'm just saying that is a plausible outcome from this because we know even the defense, just based on Kayvon Thibodeau's interview, he's like, we should have paid Saquon. He has so much respect in that locker room, and that has to be factored in.
It does. But I don't know how much longer we can continue to make these decisions based on those things because
I 100%
that's
agree.
been the Giants' MO for a long time, and it hasn't really got us anywhere from a player personnel standpoint. It's got us a nice locker room and some nice fun stories and stuff. But at some point, we got to make that decision, and business wise, and as I look at this both short and long term, I don't see a point personally to re-signing Saquon anymore at this stage of his career. And I also want to bring up the fact that like all of his numbers are way down, way down as he's aging. You know, the yards after contact, almost a half, more than a half yard down. The breakaway runs, non-existent anymore. He was a home run hitting back. That was part of what he was. Watch the tape against USC in that Rose Bowl. He's making the most electric plays in the open field and changing the game, changing that game. Watch what he did in 2018. He changed games with some of his electric plays. He had 9 runs of 40 plus yards in 2018. His breakaway run ability was over 50%, according to Pro Football Focus. Nowadays, he gets 1 a year if he's lucky, 1 or 2 a year. Maybe if we're lucky at that point. We don't see it anymore. And I feel like the yards after contact, while they are over a half a yard down, it's so obvious on tape to me. Like he is not the physical runner he was in 2018 before all those injuries in 2019. Like he is not creating that same kind of contact and that bounce off contact and fighting for he's fighting, but like when he's going up the middle, but like I'm not seeing a ton of shake and bake in the shaking off tackles in the open field. He still forces missed tackles. Still think he does a really good job of that. I think he's been a better processing back, but all the numbers don't back any of that up. That's just what the tape says, Nick. Like we feel like he's been better processing on tape, but his success rate as a running back is way down. It was among the worst in the NFL, like toward the end of the season. And yes, a lot of that is offensive line. But that also does, by admitting that a lot of that is offensive line, it doesn't give us the solution can't just be, okay, re-sign Barkley. How does that make any logical sense? If we're admitting that the offensive line is maybe the main reason for some of these success rates going down, then we're also saying that the offensive line is the main reason for if a running game is successful or not at all. And so in that case, it's like, what am I getting out of this guy? I'm re-signing a guy going into age 27 who I think has been pretty overrated as a receiver, in my personal opinion, as a route running receiver. He's good. He's not the next level that makes a difference, like the Christian McCaffrey level or the Kamara level. And injuries, ACL, MCL, high ankles every 2 of the years, high ankles, ton of tread on his tires because the Giants never took him off the field for the last couple of years, just grinding him out, tons of carries, tons of hits. From an asset standpoint and from a roster building construct, it's becoming at this point, it makes no sense. Like last year, it made sense at one point. You're building with Jones. You're hoping Jones takes the breakout. You need this guy to be part of Jones' thing. And look, he was a big reason the Giants had any success on offense at all in 2022. As Kayvon Thibodeau said, Thibodeau said 30. He accounted for 28% of the Giants' explosive plays that helped them win those football games. They're a grind out team trying to win game 70-13 in 2022. You need an explosive play to alter the impact of that game. And Barkley was the guy to do it. Jones did it occasionally, mostly with his legs and occasionally with his arm, very rarely, but it was mostly Barkley. But that doesn't mean you look back at 2022 again and be like, we need to get back to that. That's not anything to strive for. They didn't even compete against the Eagles that year. Their best win was against a Ravens team that wasn't clearly as good as they are now. So it's like, I don't know, man. I'm struggling to find any long-term wise. I see no interest in Barkley. Short-term wise, I get it. If you want to try to run it back with Jones, restructure the cap on Jones again, like we've talked about, get him another weapon, do this and that, and make it work with Jones, then yes, it actually does make some sense to re-sign Barkley and just eat the dead cap down the line when the injuries pile up and he's no longer effective. That's how I look at it, at least.
Saquon Barkley too, man. Just looking at some of the advanced stats on speed, it's dropped off. Like in 2018, his top speed was 21.9 miles per hour. It's about 20.7, I think, this last year. So it has dropped off. People be like, oh, it's not that. It's like that is a lot on the grand scheme of things.
Makes a big difference.
It does make a big difference, especially when your skill set is really predicated on your explosiveness. I love Saquon Barkley as a football player. I think he has been a great face of the New York Giants. I just think the Giants need to take a long look in the mirror and say, what are we doing with our current, or what's our, not even just our ceiling, like what is our expectation, right? Like what is our ceiling expectation? Can we win a Super Bowl with this infrastructure in place? And I would say no. And by the time the Giants get the right personnel in place, how old Saquon? Saquon is going to turn 27 in like 3 days, I think.
And are you still grinding him towards 350 touches a year at that point?
With the injuries and everything. So it's one of those difficult situations where it's like, hey, you're still young enough to go off, but like we're not in a position to be giving you 12, 15, kicking that stuff down the line. So yeah, I'm there with you, man. And it's unfortunate. And I'm not saying Saquon's not an effective player or a good football player, that he doesn't have value or anything like that. I just think the Giants need to take a long look in the mirror and see where they're at right now. And it's not necessarily in a great position.
Yeah, and if you were like the Giants were one of those Super Bowl contending teams the past 2 years, like if they had, what was that?
Mm. I wanted to run this by you though, because this somewhat changes my perspective, or at least
Okay.
it definitely challenges the way we're both sounding right now. If the Giants trade up, get Drake May, get Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels,
Mm-hmm.
how does your opinion change?
Great point. If the Giants are to make that decision to trade up, then it does change my opinion
It
on
does
if
change
I
my
want to
opinion.
keep Saquon Barkley, because now I'm interested in the short term of this team at that point. That
And his development.
and his development, the quarterback's development, and the short term. And by short term, I don't just mean by short term, I don't just mean the short term success and wins and
I
losses
know.
of the team.
Yeah.
I know you know. I'm just trying to clarify for everyone. I mean the short term development, short term, all of it goes into short term. And then I am interested in that. And then I'm also more willing to eat dead cap down the line because I know I'm getting out of cap at the quarterback position because I'm going to have Williams or May or Daniels for cheap, cost controlled under the cap at the quarterback position for 5 years. So I don't have to worry as much about eating some dead cap on Saquon Barkley down the line if he's not as effective and the injuries come in. So yes, it will change my mindset in my mind almost completely if they're able to get a quarterback and bring that in, because you know what's going to help that quarterback? Having a running back like that to take away some attention off the quarterback. And, you know, even more so, it might help to just have a wide receiver, one, to take away attention, but that'll be harder to do if they trade up, obviously, but not impossible. There are some good receivers who are going to be on the board in round two. This class, man,
Good,
this is
bro.
like the most loaded. So I was talking about how this might be the worst running back class I've ever seen on paper. This might be the best offensive tackle class I've ever seen on paper. I don't know if anything could even compete with it. The offensive tackles in this class are like, there's like it goes like 5 deep of guys who could be top 5 picks in another class if it's a weak offensive tackle class, maybe in 6 deep. Like there are dudes in this class, and then it goes like even deeper. Like you're talking about, like I think I was looking at it today. Let me give this exact. Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 overall this is a crazy number. I was looking at this today. I want to total this up real quick though. And this, if you ever been on NFL.com, it's an absolute disaster of a website.
NFL.com is not formatted correctly. That's
It's
all I'll
so
say.
formatted
And if
so
you
important.
if you ever played NFL.com fantasy, geez, just delete yourself from life. I do. I'm in a league that does, and it's terrible. They don't reseed. The app
Oh,
sucks. It crashes all the time. Oh God, it's abysmal, dude.
So he's got 4 offensive tackles in his top 14, right? He's got 5 in his top 16, 6 in his top 17, 7 in his top 18. Okay. Now we're going down. This is great radio, but I'm trying to make a point. 7 tackles in his top 18 is, first of all, insanity. I've never seen anything like that. I was going down now because I knew there were more players down the line of his top 50, but another guy at 31 he's got, and then he's got a few more guys down the line. But 7 tackles in his top 18 is absolute insanity. Like this is I've never seen that at the offensive tackle position in any draft class, Nick. And so just, I don't know where I was going there and why we even got to
I'm
that
trying to think
offshoot.
of 2021. It wasn't that stacked, but you had Penei Sewell, you had Rashawn Slater, you had Christian Darrisaw,
Mm,
and I think wasn't that was Alex Leatherwood was drafted
yeah.
that year, but that wasn't wise by the Raiders, and you had Tevin Jenkins as well. So
Oh,
yeah,
right.
not as stacked, but they had a couple
Those
top
guys weren't
guys.
all top 17 type prospects. Yeah,
No,
exactly. But
I would say
still,
Darrisaw, Sewell, and Slater were though.
to us, yeah. But like
Yes,
even the NFL, that wasn't the case because Darisaw went in the 20s at some point. I
I
think he
think
went like
so.
21 right after the Giants.
We're
Actually,
fine.
I think he went right after the Giants took Kadarius Toney. Which is
No, so
just,
Christian Darrisaw went 2 picks after, or 3
it's
picks after. So it went
just
Kadarius Toney, Kwity Paye, Caleb Farley, and then Christian Darrisaw.
imagine if we just had Darisaw on this roster now instead of the third round, whatever they got back from, like Darisaw at right tackle, just holding that shit down for us. And maybe he couldn't have played right tackle. We don't know. Like, you never know with the
And then
transition.
think
But
what would have happened with the next year, because the Giants still would have more than likely owned the same pick. Like I don't know if that would have had such a ripple effect to where it would have really aggressively
then you get
affected the
Garrett
draft
Wilson
order. Then you get Garrett Wilson or Drake London or
instead of
somebody.
Evan Neal.
Yeah, it's
Great.
devastating.
It's fun to think about. But, circling this back to running back with Barkley, let's say, and Matt Breida is a free agent. I think that has passed. I think this will be that
Yeah,
was his
yeah.
last season with the Giants. That's fine. They have Eric Gray on the roster and Gary Brightwell. So let's, before we move on to what we might want to do in free agency of the draft, consider, and we'll talk all hypotheticals when it comes to the draft. We're not going to name players because we're not at that point yet, Nick and I, but just the idea of when to take it back and that stuff. But as far as the current roster goes with Brightwell and Gray, assuming they're both back, or at least Gray for the most part, are almost definitely, I would say. Where do you view those guys heading into this season? Like, do you view those guys as people who can be a big part of a committee? Do you view those guys as a 1A of a committee, or a 1B of a committee, or a 1C of a committee? Like, or even just as like, and I'm sure this is not the case, but I'm willing to ask it. Do you view any of those guys as taking on the role that Barkley's had in this offense the past 2 years?
I think the Giants would be hopeful to get one of those guys to be 1B.
Mm-hmm.
They haven't proven it yet. That's the thing. They haven't really had the opportunity to, because they've been playing behind Saquon Barkley. The New York Giants will know much more than we will. Could one of them be a 1A? Sure. But is that a little bit of aggressive if I were to sit here on this podcast and say, yeah, Eric Ray is going to be the 1A? Yeah, because we haven't seen it yet. We haven't seen Gary Brightwell's been in the league quite a while. We've seen flashes from both. I'm not comfortable going into the season with just those two and then say like a seventh round pick or yes. something, right? I think you need a little bit more substance to your running back room. But I am also willing to say the Giants are going to know better than I am. You did bring in Joel Thomas, who is their running back coach right now, who did a good job down in New Orleans. Now, how much of that was Joel Thomas? How much of that was Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram he had for a little while and the personnel that they had? But if I had to say something, I would say you're hopeful that one of them can be a 1B, but I don't necessarily look at the situation and say, yes, it's going to be 1A, 1B, and they're going to figure it out.
Okay, that's fair. And I think I'm probably in the same exact boat as you. I have some hope about Gray based on what I've seen in his tape. And I honestly have a little bit of, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, but the floor, you got to look at this too from like a ceiling and a floor standpoint, right? Because the floor of you going into this season saying that's 1A, that's 1B, we'll figure it out is very low. Is very low. If you aren't certain, or if you don't have a great beat as a coaching staff on if these guys are doing it, if it's all prognosticating and projecting, because we haven't seen it manifest itself due to the fact that Saquon Barkley was on the roster eating up most of the snaps.
That's a good point. And, that's something the Giants will have to tackle because it goes in the next part of this, which is like one underappreciated aspect of Barkley's game to me has been his progression as a pass blocker. And it's like, if you go into this year with just Gray, who has very limited NFL snaps, Brightwell, who actually I liked his tape, by the way, in 2022, Brightwell's tape. And I think he's got more, like he's one of those guys to me that's better on film than he is on the testing time or like what people would expect out of him. Was that the bird in the background?
Oh, you heard that? Yeah. That's
what is that bird again?
So his name is Oscar. He's an African gray parrot who has been in my life since I was 4 years old. We got Oscar, and yeah, he's about a 28-year-old or 29-year-old.
Get him to say something.
Yeah. He talks all the time. He sounds
get him to say something real quick.
Well, he's in the other room right now. He's not in my room. Yeah, I go in there all the time. I say, "Give me a kiss." He gives me a kiss. I say, "Wave." He waves to me. I give him that. Oh yeah, cool. All the time. Sounds just like my mother. Like growing up. Oh yeah, just because they mimic African gray parrots. They mimic female voices so much better. It's much easier for them to mimic a female voice than it is a male voice. So growing up as a kid, you'd come into my house, and he was in the basement at the time. And he would be saying stuff like, Nick, get your shoes on, Steve, brush your teeth. And like just saying stuff that my mom would be yelling at us before we would go to
funny
school.
As hell.
Oh yeah, dude, all the time. He curses. He's hilarious, man.
That's so funny. I never knew, like, birds I always assumed to be stupid because their brains are small. But, parrots kind of put that all into a different, they make me rethink everything when it comes to birds, I would say.
Look up Alex, the African gray. He's passed away now, but wildly smart. They are very smart. Now they're animals, and they're like dumb from an animal standpoint.
But those birds are smart. But like, what about like a there's some dumb birds out there. Am I right about that or wrong? And by the way, I'm going to offend a lot of people with this.
No. Of course there are, but this is an exotic.
Yeah, this is a different kind of bird, right?
Yeah. This is a much smarter. Like he knew that we were leaving. Like he like knew like, oh, he's going by this door. This door usually makes this sound, so I'm going to mimic the sound and things like he like can pick up on things. He's pretty perceptive for an animal,
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, I'll have to meet him one day, but I don't know where's before he was squeaking. I heard him again there. Where we were on these pass. So yeah, the pass protection point. So it's like Barkley's made a huge jump. And are you just going to walk into a season without a guy who you feel comfortable as a running back in a passing game in pass protection, especially given Daniel Jones's limitations pre-snap when it comes to what he's been able to do, like from just getting the checks right, understanding where the free blitzers are coming from for a year 6 quarterback. It's just not where it needs to be. Like, do you trust that? Do you trust a running back to be on that same page right away that hasn't had?
I don't think Jones is as bad as what you just sold it at the pre-snap phase of when it comes to blitzing. I think he has identified blitzers better over the last couple seasons. I'm willing to
I agree
give
with that.
him. Yeah,
I'm putting it. I'm not saying he's bad at that. I'm saying he should be much better at having this many snaps and
but
this many
to
starts.
the main point that you were
Yeah.
making, Eric Gray, rough. Like go back to
Right.
preseason,
Yeah. Really
very rough.
rough.
Go back
I
to
don't know if you could
college.
trust that.
No, you can't. And that's the primary thing. If you ask any coaches,
Yeah.
what do you want from your running back? I want them to pass protect. That's one of the main. That's why like players who came out of college who actually could pass protect, they get in the game early as rookies, right? And you have these talented dudes. You're like, oh, why isn't he getting in the football game?
Yep.
What the hell's wrong? Why is Jahmyr Gibbs not getting in like early in the season? And David Montgomery's out there on third down. It's like because David Montgomery is much better in pass protection. Now,
Yes.
Gibbs came along as the season progressed, right? So that's one of my big concerns if the Giants go in, because I think your third down back has to be Gary Brightwell at that point. And I'm not even 100% certain how good Gary Brightwell is because we've had Saquon Barkley and Matt Breida as the running backs who typically stepped in on and passing situations.
Right. Or put in those pass blocking situations. So then it's like, what do you do? Do you go to free agency? And let's take a look at some of those guys, because that's the thing. Like, I don't really, unless you're going to get like a cheap veteran back out of free agency, Nick, I don't see the point of going to free agency if you're not going to re-sign Barkley. So it's like Derrick Henry's available. I don't think Derrick Henry has any interest at 30 joining a team where the Giants are at. In my opinion, he'll sign with a contender. You got Josh Jacobs, who's younger, a lot younger. He's a year younger than Saquon Barkley. So not a lot younger than Barkley, younger than Derrick Henry. Tony Pollard, who's about the same age as Saquon Barkley. Austin Eckler, who's older, 28, for a running back that's considered old. And then you maybe can go to like a Gus Edwards type, right? Or a Devin Singletary or a Dante Foreman type. If the Giants do go that route, I think they're going to have to, and by that route, I mean letting Barkley go and letting him walk in free agency, Nick. I think they're going to kind of have to sign a veteran for the reason you said right there, which is, can they trust Eric Gray in pass protection? They probably like what they're going to get out of Gray in year 2 in the run game, and maybe even in the pass game if they could ever set up the screen and get things going in the passing game from a running back standpoint. They're probably not going to love the projection as a pass blocker. So they're going to have to, because you can't just look at it like, all right, well, we have these guys. We're not going to re-sign Barkley. We don't really want to pay for running back, given that we're letting Barkley go. We want to save the cap there. Let's just draft somebody. And that guy might not be able to be held up in pass protection right away either, right? Like as a rookie, then you're in a really tricky spot. So I think the Giants are going to sign a veteran back if they don't sign Barkley. It's just a matter of which one of these dudes, because I look at this free agent crop, Nick, and like, yeah, there's some big names up top, but like, I don't know, man. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Devin Singletary, Dante Foreman. I feel like out of those dudes, like Foreman might be the guy I would trust the most to be in the type of role that we're talking about.
I'm going to look at this from a glass half full perspective. And I think you actually can, because the Giants, while if they don't go in the direction of the Austin Ecklers, because you're not going to give a big contract, the market will dictate that. If free agents know Saquon Barkley is gone, they know that you can come to the New York Giants and have opportunity, because Gary Brightwell and Eric Gray are your main competition. And I think a lot of these free agents are going to look at this situation and be like, I'm 26, I'm out of a job. I want to get carries and prove to the NFL that I'm good and that my offense sucked or that I was hampered by injury. And then they can come here and do exactly that. Devin Singletary kind of did that this year, right? He was like Dameon Pierce. Yeah, he had a good rookie season, but he might not be now, I'm sure Devin Singletary wasn't thinking about it this way, but when he got into camp, he's like, dude, this system fits me so much better.
Yes.
And now Devin Singletary is going to get another contract instead of just being somebody who toiled away as the second running back on a better team and then is out of the league. So that's one thing that the Giants, I think, have in their advantage as they enter this free agent market if they want to sign somebody to a cheaper deal.
I like that a lot. Opportunity. That's everything, especially at the running back position. Giants can offer you that. A guy I have my eye on, and it's not a great free agent crop, but a guy I have my eye on. I mean, again, Dante Foreman's definitely up there on the list for me. I think he's a nice power back. He can probably handle the role. But somebody I like, who I feel like has been a tad underrated, and I mostly like his film with the first team he was with, and he had a kind of an injury plagued season this year, is Damian Harris, former Patriot, then Bill, had good tape at college level, good tape with the Patriots early on, just 26 years old, turning 27. Like, to me, that there's a little bit of upside with a player like Damian Harris if the Giants do go this route.
Absolutely. Damian Harris. There's some gross names here that actually like have solid NFL film, like Zach Moss.
Yeah, Moss has good NFL film, but I feel like
it's
maybe he
gross
won't get
saying
money. If he can get Moss cheap, I kind of like Moss.
He's not
I didn't
exciting.
even see Moss on this list. I miss Moss on this, to
I'm
be
on
honest.
Over the Cap right now.
Okay.
So I mean,
I was
Over the
going off
Cap
the
is
spot track.
Over the Cap is generally a little bit better than Spot Track. But
Agreed.
I could be off there. So you have a player like that. You have a Boston Scott who's used to scoring touchdowns against the New York Giants, right? So maybe no, but that's more of a special teams type of asset. AJ Dillon might be a running back. Kareem Hunt, these guys who are a running back who can come in and be that 1A possibly to the 1B of whoever wins between Eric Gray and Gary Brightwell. But again, this is like us saying these are not going to be all that inspiring.
True.
You're looking to just give a cheap contract out, and then those guys would come in here and compete. Ideally, you're going to get, I would say, a Deontay Foreman. I think that's the name that kind of jumps out to me because I'm saying Tony Pollard and Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Austin, all those guys are out. Gus Edwards, I'm imagining he's going to stay with the Ravens, probably on a
even
cheap
so,
deal.
I think he's a system-based back. I don't want him at all.
He's a very physical, like hard-nosed type of running back. And then you have DeAndre Swift. I think he's going to be a free agent as well, but I think the Eagles will retain him. So it's not.
I don't think they'll retain him. By the way,
you don't think they'll?
No, I don't think the Eagles are the type of franchise that pays running backs. But
I don't know how much the pay is going to be.
Yeah,
that's the thing, man, because the market is going to dictate all of this. And with those top names, man, Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, Tony Pollard, and Austin Eckler, those are 5 pretty respectable running backs. Pollard definitely had to step back.
Name-wise, for sure.
Name-wise, right? So those guys might get deals that the Giants aren't going to be willing to give out. But then all of the secondary group, you just need to find the Devin Singletary, who was in this group, mind you, within that secondary group who can come in and give you some solid football. I mean, like, I see Antonio Gibson's name, and I'm like, that's an explosive running back who's just so
I'm intrigued by him, actually. I didn't even see him on this list either. But he's so frustrating, Antonio Gibson. Like
the fumbles, man.
The fumbles, the poor processing that I've seen, just like you know who I love, who you've turned me on to. I love his tape now, and I think he's so underrated at the NFL level. It's Brian Robinson. You were so right about that.
I love Brian.
You saw something in his Bama tape that a lot of other people didn't see. The Redskins, obviously, or the Commanders, obviously, were able to see it, and good for them. Like if he was able to get him, like that's intriguing to me. Gibson, it's like a lot of name brand, and he had that fun fantasy season. And like he was an explosive back at some point in his career. Like coming out of college, he was super explosive and was supposed to be a great receiver. None of that's really developed. Like you don't see a lot of explosive plays anymore. You don't see anything in the receiving game that you were supposed to see there. At least I haven't. And then there's the combination of the two things you mentioned, which is the fumbles and the poor processing from a mental standpoint as a running back. That's literally kept him off the field there and, got him benched at multiple points. So yeah, that one seems intriguing on paper, but I don't know if that's actually that good.
All right, this is gross. And I'm going to get on for this.
Uh-huh.
What about Ezekiel Elliott?
I don't hate that.
I know it's gross. I know it's disgusting, but he might have an axe to grind. Be like, I'd play the Cowboys.
I don't hate the Zeke
the Giants
at all.
He got like what, $3 million?
This one's going to get us crushed in the comments.
It's fine though. It's fine. He might be, dude, of the attainable running backs who are going to get paid.
Yes,
he's probably like the best of that group.
And he's not going to get paid. You don't have to pay him really either. That much.
Because again, what was the primary thing that we were like, yo, we need to ensure if we want to have a capable offense, it's not going to get our quarterback killed. Pass protection is sound. Ezekiel Elliott's one of the best pass protecting backs in the league. And he's an okay receiver. He's just not all that exciting from an explosiveness standpoint.
Yep. I mean, if you're looking at it like, do we want to make sure we have good pass protection and the ability, a running back who can do everything, all 3 phases? He's up there among the free agents and he's cheap. You don't have to commit to him long term. So I don't hate that. And even if they decide, Nick, that they want to get rid of Barkley, again, we disagree with it. We'd rather than bring him back in this case. But even if they decide they want to get rid of Barkley and they trade up for one of those big quarterbacks, Nick, then even in that scenario, I kind of like Zeke too, to get kind of like a veteran presence in for the quarterback. Then I like him even more. I kind of like that a lot. But I mean, I still would put Damian Harris as probably my number 1 target because I think there's some upside there. I just liked his tape early on. But
how old is he? He's 27, so he's getting up there. Damian Harris,
Damian Harris. Yeah, right. But
and Zeke is,
you're going to say
Zeke is 20.
Zeke is 27.
Dude, he's 29. And I think he just turned 29. Zeke is younger than you think. Just
Sort of, but I feel like with running backs, every year matters. It's like every month matters
100%.
with these
Yeah.
guys. If you look at the
Every
data, it's
month.
like
Yeah.
the fall off after 27 is like steep. And you even saw that this year. Like Austin Eckler, a lot of people in fantasy that I trusted, and I didn't have any Austin Eckler shares, a lot of because of this reason. And I don't want to get too much into my fantasy football strategy, but it's a big part of if I draft running backs, their age. We're like, this is the exact year to fade Austin Eckler. This is the drop off year, the steep decline year for running backs. And he played by far the worst he's played at any point in his career this year. I'm sure there were injuries, underlying things. Obviously, the offense sucked, and it didn't go the way they planned after the midway point of that season. But yeah, I just but with Zeke, it's like we know that the explosion has already gone. We would be signing him because he could get yards between the tackles, and because he can protect the passer, and because he can do all the little things right as a running back, which is valuable.
It's very valuable. So I'm right there with you. But yeah, it's not the most inspiring group of
No.
players. You also got names like Clyde
Besides Jacobs.
Edwards-Helaire. Yeah. Well, I'm not even including Austin
Yeah.
Eckler, Jacobs, Derrick Henry, Saquon, or Tony Pollard in this.
I think
I'm
out of those guys, Jacobs and Barkley are in their own
Barkley.
tier. Yeah,
I do agree with that. I think everybody else is on the back nine.
based on age. Yep. And
That's a
then it
golf
gets to the
reference for everybody.
Yeah, there you go. It gets to the next point here, the final point, which is something we discussed a lot last draft season. We were in the forefront of maybe thinking ahead, and it's if they do decide to move on, even if they sign one of these free agent backs, and by move on I mean move on from Barkley, even if they sign one of those free agent backs, there needs to be a long term. You hope there's some kind of long term strategy. We've always been big believers in building through the draft. Our BBCs by the draft. Why do we like that? We like that because we get multiple players in, lower the risk of injury, and most importantly, if you do it via the draft, you're paying them nothing, because after the first round, those contracts are 1-2 million against the cap year after year, and it
Yeah.
lowers every round that drafts. And we said last year, because of that, because you can get some of these guys around pick like 40 or 41 or 42, and they're only going to cost you 2 million against the cap, like the Kenneth Walker types, and they're going to be explosive, great players for your offense at 2 million against the cap for 4 years. It's great. And so we love that idea. We considered it last year at times. The Giants had other options. They had other needs. They had other value picks that they made with their second round pick and their third round picks. And now we head back into this year, and it may be even more defined, because they may have at that point already gotten rid of Saquon Barkley, and they may already be in the position where they can get this second round back to refeature your offense around, or a third round back, or a fourth round back. But that's when it comes to the point of like, I look at this shit, Nick, and I'm like, not a single back in the top 50 of Daniel Jeremiah's top 50 overall. I'll watch these dudes, and I do think Brooks has some intrigue to him. And I'll watch these guys. You'll watch these guys. We'll probably find some gems. But if I'm going to be finding gems, Nick, I want those gems in round 4 or round 5. I don't want those gems in round 2 or round 3. This looks to me like a class where I won't have a guy like, say, a Kenneth Walker or a Charbonnet or a Jahmyr Gibbs, who actually went a lot earlier than I expected him to go. I thought he'd be a second round pick, that you can look at in round 2 and be like, this is value. This is the way to do this. We can get him cheap under contract, and we're getting an explosive player. I'm not sure I'm going to find that in this class. And so it gets to an interesting point where, like, if the Giants do give up Barkley, I think they might be in position where the best option and the best route for them is to punt on running back for the future. I mean, for the 2020, like for this draft class and for this offseason, and be like, we'll find our future at running back, but we're going to find it in a different running class, or we'll find it in round 3, 4, 5 and mix it around with Eric Gray and try to get some kind of committee going with Gray and whoever we drafted in this, which I think could ultimately be their best path. A 4th round pick this year, team up with Gray, add a free agent like Harris or Elliott, and you might be where you need to be.
It could go with the transfer king, Ray Davis, the Kentucky.
I do like
back.
Ray Davis a little bit, but again, not like, I don't love any.
3 schools though, man. 3 schools. He was just all over the country. He went to Temple, and then he went to Vanderbilt, and then he went to Kentucky. But I understand, and I need to dive into some more tape. I was watching him at the Senior Bowl though, him and the Marshall guy, and I saw juice, but these are 22. I think he's 24, Ray Davis, since he's been to like 900 colleges and been in college Van Wilder type status up there. But but these young guys, they're going to give you some juice. They're going to give you some explosiveness, but can they pass protect? That's a huge thing. You need to be able to execute 6, 7-man protections.
You need to the run game too, right, Nick?
Of course. Yeah. Yes. I think, dude, obviously running the football, there's a lot of nuances to that.
Right.
But one of the biggest challenges and one of the biggest hurdles for these young running backs coming into the league is mastering pass protection.
Yeah.
And that's why players in their 30s, Frank Gore's last well into their 30s, right? It's because they're sound runners who understand the little nuances of running, but it's also they can pass protect. They know they're not going to be fooled. They're not going to get the quarterback killed. That's why whenever you get a young quarterback, you want that veteran running back there who's going to know where to be and when to be there when you're going up against a coordinator like a Wink Martindale.
Yep, you're damn right. So I think for me, we're going to get more into it as draft season goes, but I'm hoping we find gems because I don't love the top of this running back class whatsoever at all, and I don't personally see myself moving at any point toward. We'll watch more film and we'll see, but I don't see myself moving at any point toward using either of those second round picks or that third round pick on a running back in this class.
The Giants are just not really in a position for that unless it's
But I would, so
great value.
that's where I may disagree a little. If there was a back worthy of those picks, I'm fine taking one.
But
I know what you're saying. You're wasting a year of the contract. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not even saying that you're wasting a year of the contract. I'm saying that the New York Giants have so many needs, and this draft class is full of talented players at key positions like tackle, edge, and cornerback.
Wide receiver, too.
I would much rather spend the third round pick or the 2 seconds, of course, wide receiver on those positions than a running back.
Even interior offensive line as well. Even if it's not as deep, I still would rather spend the pick there to build the line over the running back. So I agree with you on that. It's going to be tough, but there will be classes where I'm like, you know what? The value is so good that I will take a Kenneth Walker at 40, or whatever it would be overall, whatever that may be, depending on the class in the back. But I don't think, I'm just saying early on, just to give an heads up to people, I doubt I'm going to come that way with this class. I do not like this running back class at all on paper. And it's the first year I've ever said that. Every year we've done this, I've been like, this running back class is amazing. There's so much talent. You can get it everywhere. I don't know about this class.
Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall, they both went in the second round of that draft in 2022. They were both like studs. We talked about them all the time on the podcast. I think I had Walker slightly above Breece Hall, but Breece Hall
I loved Hall.
I know a lot of people love Hall. I liked Hall too, but I think I liked Walker a little bit more. But they're both fantastic. But I need to watch more tape on the running back specifically. But I'd be shocked just off of what I'm hearing that they have the Walkers and the Halls in this specific draft class. But
completely agree with you on that. It's going to be a weird class at that position. We'll see what happens there. But that's all we have for today. Unpacking the running back position. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep it locked and loaded in Big Blue Banter podcast. More content coming your way. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.